Hi, I'm Pattu from FreeFinCal. Today, let's discuss one of the most common mistakes people do when they use an online calculator for their retirement plan. So, Ajay writes saying that he's 28 years old and wants to retire by 50, and he's used an online calculator and he wants to invest about 50% in equity and 50% in fixed income. He already has EPF and a Sensex index fund running, and he wants to know if he will be on track to retire by 50. So his monthly expenses are about 40,000. His life expectancy is assumed as 80. The current corpus is practically zero. He is starting from scratch, and the inflation he has assumed is 6%. On the return on investment he has assumed is 12%. So according to this calculator, if 40%, if the entire 40% expenses will persist up to retirement, and of course it's not a bad assumption, because some expenses will go but new expenses will come, then Ajay will need to invest about 44,500 rupees to each month to accumulate the necessary retirement corpus of about 5.25 crores by age 50. Now these are there is just one problem in this calculation. The other estimates are reasonable. 6% inflation is not so bad, but the problem is that the return assumption. Now he has said that his portfolio is 50% EPF and 50% Sensex index fund, or at least that's what he wants to attain. I don't know his current portfolio exactly, and the assumed portfolio return is 12%. So how is that possible? You can't have a 50% of fixed income and 50% of equity and get 12% returns, right? Even if you assume 12% from Nifty, even today that's not likely to happen with regularity. After 20 years, I don't think it's going to happen. So even with 12% return from Nifty and 8% return from EPF, again 8%, even for 8% today they are struggling to pay interest on time. Obviously they have to reduce it over the next 20 years. So if I take 50% of 12% and 50% of 8%, it will be about 10%. But though that's not again reasonable. So I would suggest assuming about 7% from EPF and 10% from equity, and that means the current portfolio return assumption would be 8.5%. You can't hold 50% equity for until you retire, right? So obviously you need to reduce the equity allocation. Those kind of nuances online calculators are not capable of performing. That is the reason why I keep saying either you do it DIY or you use a tool like My Robo Advisory Template, which takes into account these kind of parameters, how to reduce this equity allocation going forward. So you have to take that into account. So let's redo this with the Robo Advisory Template. So what I would suggest is life expectancy of 90 years. Assume that the investment you can increase each year by 10%. That's not too difficult. I mean, if you take into account promotions, bonuses, every year salary hikes and so on, approximately you should be able to somehow manage 10%. You should. I mean, even if it's hard, that's the kind of situation most of us find in. So I have been able to do much more than that. I've been able to do more than 20%. I think 22% every year. I've been able to increase my investments for the last 12 years consistently, and that's the reason why I was able to hit financial independence early. But at least 10% is minimum in my opinion. Assume inflation before retirement is about 7% and after retirement is 6%. So the robot tool tells you that the corpus required is about 6.616 crores, but the monthly investment required now is only about 34,000 rupees, which is lesser than what it was earlier. This is because the investments are increasing every year at the rate of 10%, so you have reduced it. Also, if you look at the robo template, it will tell you you start with 60% equity, not 50%, and then you hold on to it for about 40 years, and then you gradually drop it down to about 29%. In this example, it's 29%, and the rest of it will be fixed income. And this is how the portfolio return will vary. So instead of taking some 12% or very high return assumption, which is just for the equity part, as the entire portfolio, that's the big mistake people do. They expect 12%, 14% from equity, And when they use the retirement calculator, they will put that entire equity return as the portfolio return, which is a big mistake. So then you can see that the portfolio return gradually falls down like the equity allocation does. Then you can you will have to have a bucket strategy, and the usual bucket strategy I have in mind is of kind of a 5 bucket approach. 5% of that 6.16 crores you put in an emergency bucket, then 47% in an income bucket that gives you guaranteed income for the first 15 years, taking into account 6% inflation. This income bucket will not have any equity. Then a low risk bucket which will have 24% of the corpus, and this low risk bucket you can have about 30% equity and 70% fixed income. Then you have a medium risk bucket. This will have about 15% of the corpus. In this 15% you can have about 50% equity, 50% debt. Then the high risk bucket is only about 8-9%, and that can be entirely in equity. So if you have these kind of buckets, the total overall equity allocation will only be about 29-30%, which is fairly safe, which is on the safer side. And for somebody retiring at 50, that's a reasonably safer assumption. So this is the kind of planning that you need to do. You need to focus on the bucket strategy from day one, not later on. You need to look at the portfolio return today and how the portfolio return will keep changing when you start de-risking the equity allocation. So don't make the mistake of using simple online calculators and assuming that you'll just use 12% and not even factor into account the portfolio return. Also, don't assume you're going to get 8% from fixed EPF. It's not going to happen for too long. It's definitely not for the next 20 years. Also, equity returns will also be reduced over the next 20 years.